'cause you have set me free. There is no greater love.
All right, welcome to What God Has Done With My Pain. My name is Emily Alvarado, and I am your host. On today's episode, man, I'm excited. I got to interview Rocky Coyle, also known as Rocky. He's an incredible man with an incredible wife, Debbie. Both amazing people. In this interview, I interview Rocky, and he just is so forthcoming. Oh my gosh, I don't think I knew what to expect, because normally walking into it, you know that you're interviewing somebody and you know that you're going to hear, things that they overcame thanks to God and everything that God saw them through. But to see it from their perspective, to get it directly from them is incredible. And he delivered it. Also, he has an incredible voice. Like Rocky has the voice for a podcast. So that alone, his whole persona, it fits perfectly. I don't know. I wish I could describe it, but you'll hear it yourself, and it's incredible. His just description of everything that he's been through and just how he's seen God in all of it is amazing. And again, getting to see more of God's character in different people's lives and see that you can't really put God in a box and label him. That's not how it works. He works differently depending on the person. And I always like to say God curates depending on who you are and your personality. What might work for me might not work for somebody else. Same thing for skincare, and same thing for reading a book, and same thing for hair care. We're so different. God meets us differently. So with that being said, I am so excited for you to listen to this podcast or this episode. Also buckle down, because we did go a little bit over an hour, which I'm fine with. I am so happy that there's so much to unpack and to listen to and to just get into, because I enjoyed it the entire way. I did not know what to expect, and I just left feeling so fortunate and grateful to know Debbie and Rocky and what they've done, and how they've done it with God's help, and how God has made the impossible possible. So let's go ahead and get into that. I was the same way when I heard my own voice. I was like, oh dear, it's going to take some time getting used to.
I know.
All right. So, So are you originally from North Carolina? Let's start there.
I'm originally from Phoenix, Arizona. I was born and raised in the desert. So in the Valley of the Sun, that's where I was born. And all my family still lives in Phoenix, Arizona.
Wow.
I was the guy that left to chase my dream. I played, baseball was my passion,
Wow.
So I grew up with sports. That was the foundation. If anybody's ever seen the movie Sandlot, that's a movie about baseball, but a lot of kids love that movie. But I grew up, I was like the ninth boy born into the neighborhood that could play baseball, and so I was a little guy. And so being in Phoenix, Arizona, the weather is amazing.
Yeah.
So these guys trained me really pretty much, the guys I grew up with. So I played the Sandlot baseball coming up and had a passion for it. And I had a father who, my dad was a sports guy. He played basketball at the University of Arizona. He was a boxer. He boxed. He was a man's man. And
wow.
So there's 5 kids, and I was the second oldest of 5.
Yeah, I was going to ask how many siblings you had. What was that like, being the second oldest?
Second is you don't have to be the head guy. I was more of the personality, funny.
Oh, yeah. You didn't have to carry the responsibility.
My older brother was the serious one, Kevin. So it was me, Kevin, Rock. My name's Rock, R-O-C-K. So
yeah.
My dad gave me that name, and it was always hard because people couldn't hear what I was saying. They'd say Ron, Rob, Rod. So,
and you're like, no, that's why you spelled it. I have a friend like that who,
Rock.
Her name is Dina, but she's gotten Dinah something. So I've heard her say to people, Dina, D-I-N-A, Dina.
Yeah.
And that has always cracked me up. And it makes sense you just did it.
So I just said Rocky after a while.
Yeah.
Because that's why the name Rocky came. But Rock is the name my dad gave me. And my mom named my brother Kevin. Then my dad said, I'm going to name the next kid Rock. And so my mom goes, Rock? Like stone? Yeah. But later on, it was prophetic almost because, Rock, Peter's name is Rock. The original language, Petros, is rock.
Yeah.
So it was kind of almost prophetic that he gave me that name. Yeah. And then the next person born was my sister, Maureen. And so we're second generation Irish. So, immigrant into the United States. And Maureen, Kevin's an Irish name. Rock is kind of like an Irish name, I think. But then there was Maureen, and then the next one was going to be born, and my dad said, it's my turn. And my mom was like, I'm not going to get him to name another guy like Rock or something,
Yeah.
So she told my dad to go downstairs and get something after the baby was born. And while she was gone, she named my little brother Danny. So he didn't get, my dad said, I never got to name anybody
she sent
after
him
you.
away. I forgot something. Could you go grab that one?
He came back up and Daniel Joseph was on the, says Danny.
Oh my goodness.
And then we had a sister, Katie. So I was like,
oh my God.
So everybody's got these, there's, so.
He bamboozled him. That's amazing.
It was funny. My mom, and so my mom was an amazing woman. She always gave to everyone. She was a giver, and there was always somebody eating in our house that I didn't know. She'd always bring somebody
amazing. That's inspiring.
Yeah, so she always was like that. I think, her mother came over from Ireland, and she was her parents died, so she ended up in an orphanage. Her uncle was supposed to take care of her, and he took the money and he put her brother and her into an orphanage.
Wow.
It's interesting later on because I ended up adopting too, so it was like, but she was raised in an orphanage and kind of fought her way out of that and became a nurse. She actually is pretty feisty because after she got old enough to get out of the orphanage, she went to that uncle, and he was at a big business meeting, and she walked in on it and said, I need to talk to you. And he says, I'm not going to talk to you. And he went privately in the office, and she looked at him and said, if you don't pay for me to go to college, she goes, I'm going to tell everybody in town what you did to my brother and I.
Oh my goodness. That's her big Hollywood moment right there.
So she said, he just looked at her and she goes, I want my brother out of the orphanage too.
Wow.
And she goes, what are you going to do? And he goes, what college do you want to go to?
Oh my goodness. So what college did she end up going to?
She ended up going to, she went to, and they were in Cincinnati. I think she went to Cincinnati, the University of Cincinnati. But then she met my grandfather, who was studying to be a doctor.
Wow, that's an incredibly strong.
So she was strong, and then they became successful because he was a surgeon, and he got a disease that they would have been able to cure with cortisone. This is in the 40s. My mom was 11, and my grandfather died, and so I never got to know him. But he lied about his age and was in World War I. So my grandparents were. My grandfather was in World War I, which is crazy because, that was, but he was a young guy. He was like 16. He lied about his age. Yeah. So anyway, so he passes away. And then the guy that was helping him with his estate, he embezzled all their money and they were penniless. They lost everything. So my grandmother, again, she went back to work, and my mom and them had nothing. So they grew up. I mean, my mom pretty much from that point on they were poor because the guy had stolen all their money. And back then there wasn't ways to track things like that. So they were penniless. And my grandmother, again, she's tough. She came back up through that. And was
that around the Great Depression?
That was 40s. It was after the Depression. This was after World War I or II.
That must have been hard because you get that, and then you get up, and then you have that down again.
Yeah. So my mom was pretty much they had older siblings, so she pretty much was that. So they moved out they moved out to Arizona for a little while, then moved back to Ohio, and then she went back to Arizona to go to school, and that's where she met my dad.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, my mom and dad, they had one of these relationships that, I mean, they were in love like you'd never seen. So it was like.
Do you know how they met? Like did
they met. They met in college at like a fraternity sorority thing.
Oh wow.
And they met, and they fell in love. They had one of these relationships that was like, made you sick, pretty much. They always would dance. You come home, nobody would be there, and they'd be dancing and playing music. And then they would dance in front of, show us their moves. And
and I imagine when you're like a teenager, that must have been so like, Mom, Dad, stop.
And then you kind of liked it too, but they were really good dancers.
Wow. So
they had this like really cool, and they were always hugging and holding each other and stuff like that. It was really cool to see that in front of you. So but then I had a father who was, a man's man, but the real foundation of my life, I mean, my mom was huge, but as far as my relationship with the Lord, my dad, the foundation for me as an athlete really came from a father. And I know a lot of kids today don't have this, and this is like so important for a foundation as a boy, young boy. But my dad could have been a real, just pounding on me to be a great player and all this stuff. But the real turning point for me, and for any dad who's out there that's listening, or even the moms, the blessing you put on a kid early on is foundational to him and what he does in the future. And I saw that with me. He gave me a good name. And then even to this, I'm 62 years old. And the real foundation came when I started playing Little League Baseball. I was already good because I was athletic, and then I had a dad that would play catch with me, and I played with those boys in Sandlot ball when I was little, from when I could barely walk. So when I started playing Little League, I was like the best player, and every time I come up to bat, be like, "Hey, Rocky's up, move back," but I didn't know it. I wasn't like a guy who like was real cocky or that kind of stuff. I just played because I thought my biggest mistake in life is I want everybody to be happy and to like me. Yeah. Which that's not going to happen. Yeah. But then I didn't know it. I thought everybody was like that. So I want everybody to get on the team, and I thought they liked me doing good. Yeah. But my last game, I was up to bat and I hadn't really struck out. I hadn't struck out. I had success. And the last time up, I struck out. This guy threw it. I foul tipped the ball, and the catcher caught it, and they struck me out. And they mobbed the pitcher. That struck me out, because everybody in the whole league was like, "We finally got this guy out." But I didn't look at myself that way. I didn't know. Yeah. Everybody felt that way. Yeah. Yeah. So, but this is the real.
That was like a moment of realization.
Yeah, of the way people are. Yeah. How life is. Yeah. And my dad would come to the games, but he never sat with parents because he just didn't like the way parents yelled and stuff at their kids. So he would stand way down the left field line with his arms crossed, and he would just watch. And he saw it happening, And so I'm standing there, and I wasn't upset that I struck out, but I saw these guys going crazy. And then I came over to my bench, and they were happy. They were clapping. Then I got out, my own teammates. Yeah. Yeah. They were happy. Yeah, that you were struck out. That I struck out. Yeah. And then parents were cheering that I got out, and everybody there was cheering that I got out. And I was like, what the heck is this? And so, I started crying. I remember I cried, and I was confused. Yeah. I mean, the last thing you imagine is that your own team is excited that you failed, in a sense, like that you didn't hit the mark. Right. Yeah. So, and this is really the foundation of kind of like a father. And my dad didn't know the Lord then, but this is kind of like the beginning of that. So, I go home, and I'm in my room, and I'm crying in my room. And, he came in there, and he says, he sat me down. He always made me look at him in the eyes. I didn't like that in high school, but oh wow! But so he looks me in the eyes, and he sat me in his lap, and he says, Rock, what are you crying about? And I said, "Hey, Dad, I'm so sorry I failed you. I apologize." And I started going this, and he goes, look at me in the eyes. He says, "Let me tell you something before you start this thing called life." Mm. He says, I don't care if you get 4 hits in a game. He says, "I don't care if you're an All-American." He goes, "I don't even care if you play professional ball." He said, "You look at me and hear this." He said, "I love you." Wow. That is so good. Because you're my son. Yeah. Wow. And the funny thing is, I went on to be an All-American.
Wow.
In high school and college, and I played professionally.
Wow.
But the key was that he spoke into my heart.
Wow.
Which I saw later on, I understood that. So when I played ball, people always were amazed at me. Recently my dad came, and I teach lessons now, and he was sitting watching, and he stayed there the whole day, and he just was so proud. He said, I go, Dad, you're going to be sitting here forever. No. And some kid asked him, what kind of ball player was your son?
Yeah.
My dad and I are opposites, so he's a X's and O's guy. He's like, boom, boom, boom. He was a basketball coach, and I'm like, I run through the wall, and my shirt's untucked, and and I drove him crazy, but he always loved who I was. Yeah. And so, but he loves to do definitions of words, and he looks at the kid like a coach, and he says, that's my second born, Rock. He said, I'm going to tell you the word, and if you don't know the word, I'll give you the definition. And I'm throwing pitches to these kids listening to my dad
your grew 10 times
I'm
larger.
like, what word is he going to use for me, And now you got to remember back when he did that for me as a kid.
Yeah. I was going to ask, how old were you when that happened?
8.
Wow. I think that what he did in that moment was just redirect your eyes to your true value in his heart. Like just,
I didn't have to earn it.
You already had it, and he sat there and just told you.
Security.
That was amazing.
Foundation, security. And this is the word that he's going to use later on. Now I'm 62 now. He says to the kid, he goes, the word that I would use for my son, Rock, is tenacious.
Wow.
And I'm like, listening to that. Then he gave the definition of the word tenacious. Yeah. And he goes, you did not want to play him because he would play with everything he had. Wow. And he would never quit.
Speaking over your person too, and who you are. Exactly.
And so, I heard that, but the tenacity he didn't realize came from him.
Yeah.
When he spoke that into me. So what happens to a child is when you speak life into a child, when you speak life into them and you put a blessing on, he didn't even know he was doing it because, he didn't even know the Lord then, but he was a good man. He was a man that knew how to love.
Yeah.
And so, but he was a man's man. Now he was we weren't babies and wimps. I mean, he taught us to, we knew how to fight and to survive and to do that, but also to be, to be fair and to be,
Yeah.
But when I didn't have any fear when I played. I didn't have a fear that if I failed, I wouldn't be loved.
Yeah.
So I knew that I couldn't lose. I mean, I knew that there was security for a child, for any child to know that. And that's what I try to do with the little kids, the girls that I adopted too. I try to speak in the same way, but you speak life into people. Yeah. Like even when you walk into somebody in the store or something, you speak words of life into them and they don't even realize.
That's really good. It reminds me of the Hebrew word nefesh, which is throat. And also it's a relation to soul because in biblical context, like nefesh is the soul and it's what you take in and what you take out, like what you choose to breathe into yourself, whether it's positivity or negativity, but also how you choose to speak onto others. Right. And in the biblical text, it shows how I choose to speak, whether to you or Debbie or my own son, will determine what the outcome is. Like if I were to walk up to Debbie and was straight up and forward, she would receive it well because that's her character. Versus my son, I need to speak more into life and direct, but we're from a positive standpoint, like you're speaking, because he's receiving that from his nefesh and everything that he takes, and you model that. So that is so good because that speaks to the Hebrew word nefesh.
Amen. That's great analogy. Good job. That is really good.
I blew my mind when I first heard it. Also, like Shema, which means listen. Yes. So when you pair the two together, they're very powerful because your nefesh determines outward, inward. But Shema means that you listen to the word and you take in the word, which getting to know the translation of Hebrew words is amazing because then you see it work in the lives of others and how others speak onto things. And that's incredible. That's really good. And how about we take like a quick 2-minute break?
Okay.
We'll jump back in and I'll ask you about your father and your name, because that's such a good name, and off of what you said about the word that he described you as really does fit your character. So let's do that. All right. So now that we're back, tell me a little bit about your name. Do you think that your name has played a part in your life?
Oh, definitely. I feel like it was from the Lord, because it's really a picture, I think, who I am. I think names are, like when we picked them out for our adopted daughters, there was a purpose. Because I think my dad didn't necessarily understand it, but at the time, but I think God was directing him that way, because I think, that's kind of like a perfect name for me, Rock. And, people have always tried to make fun of it in some ways, because people go, what's your brother's name? Boulder?
Oh, no.
What's your sister's name? Pebbles?
I'm sorry.
It is funny.
I think it's funny how dedicated they were, because I couldn't come up with that. They must have sat there and really simmered on it.
Yeah, that's right. So, yes, it is. It's been that name. And then I didn't realize that God was going to call me into ministry. So, and the ministry that God called me into has not always been, I didn't always fit into like a lot of people. Like I've never been a box person. Like I didn't fit into, quote, the church, like because of my personality and what my gifts are. Because, I'm not good at sitting in like business meetings and things like that. I'm most comfortable, at a nursing home or at a school, or when somebody just loses their dad, being at a mortuary, I found why I feel weird that I feel comfortable here, that, I can minister to people.
Yeah.
And people always come to me. It's weird, in airports or when I was playing ball. I mean, I can remember leading a bat boy to Jesus that was at the game.
Yeah.
And I got this, so my name, yes, that is definitely a part of my dad. Had a big part in that, but then later on he accepted Christ and through Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and then I started understanding what rock meant, and that Jesus called Peter the Rock, so Little Rock.
Do you remember what that was like, seeing your dad come close or come in relationship?
Yeah.
With the Lord.
Yeah, I could see it. It changed. He was a coach, and it wasn't that he was a bad dad. He was a good dad. But I saw how he, when he did something wrong, he told us he was, I'm sorry, I was wrong.
Yeah.
Just things like in his failures, I could see that he was like, I could see the change in him. And then he really wanted to tell people about the Lord. And so, it changed the whole concept. All 5 of the kids know Jesus now because of my dad, and went to missionary.
Was that weird for you?
What's that?
Was that weird for you when he was like, and now we're going to church, and now we're doing...
No, we were kind of... Yeah, it wasn't weird. It was something, I didn't feel it was weird. I just saw it was like, I knew something was real, more so. See, when God works, it's supernatural, and you see the change, and it's like, and even to somebody who you thought was a great guy, it's like, but you could see the change. He was different.
Yeah.
And so, it made me want that, because he had built a relationship with me. It might've been harder if he was an idiot. And then I said, now he's, and what's the deal? He's going to be a Jesus guy or whatever,
Yeah.
But it was transforming, it was like, it was good, and I was like, but I don't think I'm that,
Wow.
I said, because he asked me if I died, where I'd go. And I thought I was a good guy, I liked helping old ladies across the street, or, So it was really, I think it was a foundational thing. We were Irish Catholic. So, we kind of had been around, religion, but never had understood what a relationship was with Jesus and a transformation. I think the difference is the power of the Holy Spirit. When the Spirit of God is somewhere, it changes everything. That's why when you walk into a room or when you go somewhere, the people will think you're the guy or the lady, and it's not. It's God's Spirit that does it.
Yeah.
That brings conviction, opens people's hearts.
Yeah.
It's not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord. And so the Spirit was on my dad, and that Spirit came in my home. And it moved and it transformed our lives. Maureen and, Kevin, Rock, Maureen, Danny, Katie, it transformed all of us through the power of the Holy Spirit. And so to answer that, it was like, I saw the change and I could see it was something different, but it was something that I knew that was good because I saw that it was something that it was, I started watching, and then I already wanted to be like my dad. So it was like, it just naturally will. And I think a dad who does that now, if you have a relationship with your kids, your whole household has a chance to come to Christ.
Yeah.
That way.
Setting the tone.
Setting the tone. Yeah. And so, God, anybody that's listening, and you always have to remember, no matter how things are going or, the mistakes, different things we have, that God has always had plan A, not plan B. Leaving professional baseball. When I left professional baseball, I felt like, this is just me now, my flesh. Later on, what people pointed out, they said, oh, you almost made it. You almost made it. And then I left and went in the ministry, started working with kids in the inner city and doing that. And the year that I left baseball, the team that I played for won the World Series.
Oh, wow. And
all my friends were celebrating on TV, and I was emptying garbage cans in an inner city church.
Wow.
Going back to school.
Wow.
And all my friends were successful on TV.
Yeah. Talk me through that. What was that like?
It was
leading up to it and then turning and listening to your call.
Yeah. It was hard.
Even up to that point where you're emptying trash.
Yeah, because we had no money. I was going back to school. I never felt smart in school, so I knew that I was going to do that. I never looked at myself as a pastor, being a pastor. That's the last thing in the world that I ever thought, and so it was really, to this day, the enemy tries to play on that because, all my callings have not been easy. I mean, as far as quote that, I've had to kind of die to myself and to go. So to watch that, not only once, but twice, the two teams I played on won the World Series after I left. So I never got to be a part of that.
Yeah.
So, the enemy's like, look at what could have been. So it was real in front of my face.
Yeah.
But yet, like I said, God has plan A. He had purposed for that. And it was really hard. I'm not going to say it was easy because it's hard because, we didn't have money. It was hard to eat. And we're ministering in the inner city but yet I look back at it and, to see the amount of kids' lives that were, I probably won't see those until, I get to heaven.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like laying your treasures up in heaven. Like, although here on earth, there was this being accomplished after you walked away. And the enemy's like rubbing it in your face and like, look what you missed out on. Look what you could have had you stayed on the path that you're on and not listened to your calling. But then it's like on the other end, it's like, oh, but like the treasures that you have stored up in heaven. Like the cheers that have gone on for every life that you touched, for every person's heart who was transformed through your willingness and openness, and also for the people that you were willing to see who others chose not to see. And so like that is incredible because you're right. Like the enemy will rub it in your face and just.
He does it to this day.
Oh yeah.
Because now they're coaches and they're making the guys that were my teammates were coaches now and they're on television and so the enemy lies, and then you're here, I'm trying to help support these 5 girls, and I'm 62 and I'm working 13 hours, and and the lie that you're not anything, you didn't succeed. All the reason I'm saying, I know the truth.
Yeah.
I know what the truth is, but anybody out there who's battling feels like, hey, there's something wrong with me. No, you battle. The enemy always seeks to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus says, I came, you might have life. So I battle with that, but then I have to keep telling myself the truth. And that's what you have to do. You have to tell yourself the truth. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. He knows the plans he has for me, for good and not evil, to give you a future and a hope. Yeah. He's planted everything along the way. And so now I try to embrace each day and say, this is where he's called me. This is who he is. I'm going to, this is going to be, God's going to work in a powerful way. And, I know one day there's thousands and thousands of kids that know Christ because God used me. Yeah. And I see it. Throughout baseball, I saw it, that I was faithful from the time, I met Jesus at 18. I'm a professional baseball. I was a college ball player as a Christian, all the temptations.
Yeah.
I kept my testimony through all that stuff. It was real for me. It wasn't some game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then through professional baseball, coming out of the locker rooms and all the temptations and being a man of God. You know, it's funny, Debbie, you talk about, I come out of the locker room, girls would go, "Ooh, Rocky," to ask Debbie about it. Because I was really big muscles, and they go,
pull Debbie aside.
Ask her about it. She'll laugh. Because Debbie would be sitting there with my kid.
Yeah. I know Debbie was not
she's like, no, she just goes, "Oh, okay, I need a night off. You girls, here, you watch Josh for me. I want to go out tonight. You think he's so cool." And then, Mrs. Coyle, it was so funny. Because she just was, but she always was good about that and just laughing. But no, keeping your testimony through that on the road, because it's so easily. But I can say here on this podcast, I always kept myself true to God and to that. And I always tried to put myself around people that were on the team that had like-minded as me to walk with that. Because we're out here and there's no way you can do it. Iron sharpens iron. There's no way you can't do it without. Yeah. You can't do it on your own, and to sit there and say I'm strong enough to do this is a lie.
You need a community, and you need one that's gonna sharpen you
and speak it and tell you the truth. Hey, man, what are you doing?
Yeah, call you out on the things that you're doing, because we talked about it before we started recording, but it's great to have someone speak life into you. It's another thing to have someone enable you while you're doing the things that you shouldn't be doing.
Exactly.
Even in a relationship or a marriage, if you realize that there's someone who is cheating, you're not going to start a fire by going to the spouse, but you're going to go directly to the source and say, "Hey, what are you doing?
Exactly.
What is going on here? What we need to bring attention to this. You need to reflect on what's going on," versus being like, "Oh, I'm sure there's something going on. I'm sure that you are going through some stuff." It's very important what crowd you're with. And so like-mindedness is so important, finding, because if you surround yourself with people who are only going to bring you down or even cheer when you fail and not tell you what your father told you of we love you regardless of success or failure. We love you for you and who you are, and nothing that you do will bring value to you other than what you are doing now, which is just plainly existing. Exactly. So that is incredible. And do you remember, how did God tell you, or what were you doing? Do you remember when it was that you felt called to ministry, or when you were like you had to really truly reflect, I have to step away? When did you feel that placed on your heart? Well,
when in my profession, I kept getting blocked. I mean, I was successful and I was putting up the numbers, and it just kept blocking. And I'm like, what, why am I not getting to where I need to go? Because all these things, devastating things kept happening, and it kept, but I also didn't feel like I was a minister. I was like, you want me to go into, I'm not, that's not me. Oof. And I'll tell you something. There was a story about speaking life. This is crazy, but I was in high school and I was 17 years old, and I wasn't a Christian yet. And I was in college composition class. And I was always, and the teacher's name was Mr. Hughes, Richard Hughes. Ooh, okay. He was a guy he was a really cool guy. He used to come to all of our events. Yeah. He was a really hard teacher. So, I was kind of having fun. He'd let me cut up in class just a little bit. He would make me work hard. So I'll never forget this. It was so crazy. I look back at my life. So I'm in class and I'm being goofy, and Mr. Hughes is smiling, and he's the guy that I used to give my paper to. He'd look at it and say, "Hey, try again." I'd have to go back. But he was a good teacher, and I learned a lot. And so, but I was in class one day with all my friends. We were laughing. And he said to me this, and I'm not kidding you, what he said here is unbelievable. He goes, "You'd be a good minister one day, like a pastor." And I was like, all my friends were like, "Rock, man, what are you kidding me?" It's like, because they all used to hang out with me, and I was like, and I remember
and they know you. It's kind of like when it says in the Bible, your own town, your own home can't accept you as a prophet because they saw you grow up. They know who you are.
And so I'm sitting there in class, and I was like, I didn't know what to say. I was like, I remember looking at him like, he goes, "No," and then guys were going to me, "Hey, Father Rock, hey, Father Rock." So you fast forward that he said that to me, and I remember it.
Wow.
So 30 years later, my high school baseball coach dies, and in his will, he knew that I was a minister, and he wanted me to do his funeral.
Wow.
So they flew me, the family flew me from here in
Wow.
North Carolina when I was living here.
Wow.
They fly me to Arizona, and I haven't seen my high school. See, I went away to play pro ball and all that stuff. So I haven't seen anybody in my high school. I never went to any high school reunions because I was always playing ball and I was away, living in other parts of the country. I come back to this funeral. Everybody comes to Coach Coppinger's funeral.
Oh my goodness.
Coach Roy Coppinger.
What a blast.
So I'm up there, and now I had been a minister for like 25 years.
Wow.
You know, so I already knew how to do that stuff.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So I was up there, and I'm doing it, and I'm really sad because I love my coach, and I did the eulogy. I was doing the eulogy, and as I'm doing the eulogy, I look out, and there's Mr. Hughes. He's like this, sitting out there with his arms folded, and he's looking at me from the audience, and he's shaking his head up and down like, and he points at me in the middle of the sermon. He's going, "I told you
so."
He said it with his mouth. I could see it.
Wow.
And when I saw him, I knew exactly what he was talking about.
Goodness.
And he came up to me afterwards and he said, "Do you remember?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Right when I looked, I already knew it. I saw you and I knew exactly. You said that to me in class." And so I would have but so to look back, you know, I didn't feel like worthy of that. But, you know, it's like, you know, I've always battled with that. I always felt like a failure. Yeah. When we went through our freedom stuff, and yet you talk to people around you, "Oh God, man, how can you feel it?" But that's just the way the enemy plays on you. Yeah. You know, I felt like a failure even as a minister because 2 or 3 churches I went to, you know, people maybe always didn't understand who I was in my heart, you know, and I would always trust people. And then pastors, 3 pastors I worked with fail. I mean, then I got blamed for, you know, just because I stood up for what was right, you know, and I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. Yeah. And they stayed empowered and try in spite of, you know, and so I felt like a failure in ministry. Yeah. I felt like a failure in baseball. Yeah. I felt like a failure in ministry. I felt like a failure, you know, all throughout because nothing was all these, you know, it was always behind. I did better when I was helping the guy that was, you know, struggling or, you know, stuff that isn't seen,
because
which
that's
is
where
fine.
your puzzle piece fits the best, too, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. I know like a story of, this isn't mine, but Martin grew up in the church. And so there was one pastor that to this day, like he absolutely adored, loved what he stood for. And he was the type of pastor where he wanted outreach, constant outreach, like to the meek and the less. Like he wanted to reach those. He wanted to plant. He wanted to bring food and shelter. And the church, the reason Martin and his family left that church was because that church threw that pastor out, unfortunately. And because of, I don't know whether it was donors or what exactly, but there was a letter that was sent out to everyone but that pastor. And Martin's parents received a letter, and they were just hurt because it was just something, again, like behind someone's back, not direct. And just saying like, our money shouldn't be going to this. Like we should be focused more on the actual church and the actual community already within the church. And that pastor basically got driven away because his heart was outside of the church with those who needed to be reached. And so then, you know, he left and Martin's family left, and they were like, this is not the place for us because we really cared for him. And so I imagine like that can be very hard and defeating because his heart was in a similar place as yours, of like, out there is what we need to be doing and focusing. And kind of like it says in the Bible, it's not the well who need a doctor, but the sick who need a physician. So it's very powerful. And that's incredible because you do get hit with certain walls. And I mean, there are, you know, people who follow Jesus, and we do have some Pharisees, and it's hard in that because you're balancing and you're trying to, I think in freedom, I'm sure you saw the video, but in one of the, or at least it was talked about, you can either always feel like you're falling short constantly all the time, or you can get to a point where you feel like you're always doing everything right and everyone else is wrong. Like they're not meeting their set expectations with their relationship with the Lord, and you reflect like, because I'm so high up here, you are so down there, or you're constantly beating yourself up for it and you feel like, oh, I could be doing better, but I'm not. And one of my favorite things, or to think about, I like to ask like close friends, who do you relate to most in the Bible? And I'll give you an example. I relate most to Peter or David. Why? Because I'm just like Peter in the sense of like, you tell me what we're doing, let's go. Let's go, go, go. I'm on it. Swing the sword, cut the ear off. I'm all down for God. And same with David, like, let's beat down Goliath. But I'm also like David and Peter in their flaws. When pressure gets hard and I'm caught between a wall and a hard place, or rock in a hard place, it's interesting to think that I can crumble just as easily. Like David in Psalms, he's like, oh, the Lord is so good and he's fantastic and almighty. And then he's like, oh, everything's horrible. I can't do anything right. I suck at this. I suck at that. And then it goes back to butterflies and rainbows. And then it goes back to like thunder and rain. And same thing with Peter. It's, oh, Lord, I would never deny you. I'm here for you all the time. And then suddenly he's like, I have never seen that man before in my life. And so I relate to those two to where my passion for the Lord is there, in the same sense that their passion is there. But I also admit that I can fall just as easy as David does.
That's right.
Because he's anointed, he's loved by God, he's accepted by the Lord. And to see, one of the things that I've really been stuck on is reading the Old Testament and seeing how God will anoint these incredible men. And something happens along the way where they fall. Solomon prays for wisdom. He gets wisdom, but then he falls due to the women that he is with and believing in their gods. And David is doing fantastic. And even he had multiple opportunities to kill Saul, and he does not do it because he recognizes that God's anointed one is to be left alone and not touched, and that God will do what he feels best. And then out of nowhere, he's putting Bathsheba's husband in the front line. And I'm like, where did you go from being this righteous man to where you are? And so I relate to that, to where sometimes the line gets blurry and sometimes you can lose yourself. And I have to redirect myself to the Lord. So I really relate to Peter's attitude, to his like straightforwardness. Again, why Debbie cracks me up, because I love just the directness of it. And so I've biblically have always related to them. I wish I could relate to someone like Matthew or James. And like, I love their values, but I also recognize my flaws. And I love like The Chosen, the TV show. I love getting to see that character portrayed and being like, oh my gosh, that's me. I have the same way of thinking and acting and all of those things. So have you ever related to a book in the Bible to a person in the Bible?
Yeah, I think that like some of the ones like you're talking about, but I think that, like, they're human beings. They're not superstars. Yeah. And like I used to tell my youth group, I said, look, if you ever see me walking in the mall with somebody other than Debbie, you have every right to come up and ask me who it is. You know what I'm saying? You have a right to come up and ask me. I'm not, because I'm going to get mad, and I don't want to get mad. I don't want to have a bad day, but I'm going to. So I'm more the one that wants to make I'm like maybe Barnabas or James, where I was trying to, I see in The Chosen, his brother constantly trying to get him to, but I have a side of me that could fight too. Yeah. Yeah. So, I want to if somebody hurts somebody in my family, you are going to pay. Yeah. I always fought when I grew up on people that were being picked on or somebody that does something wrong, and I will do whatever it takes to make sure that you will never do that again. Yeah. I'm saying, I can't believe that I did that. Or when I'm driving, I don't want anybody to cut me off or to go faster than me. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? Why do I feel that way? Yeah. I could have a road rage here and then go and lead the guy to Jesus, Yeah. And I'm like, what in the world? So I think that probably I have a mixture of those, but I think what you're saying, what you said when you related to those two characters, to be a Christian, to really be balanced in your life, to realize that when I would minister to people and they would tell me these awful things, I knew that I was just as capable of doing that. Yeah. Not to be self-righteous. they would die. I've heard horrible things, but I know that I'm a sinner that's only saved by grace. I always tell people when I speak somewhere, I said, if I could show you on the screen the things that I've done wrong or the thoughts that I've had, it would be embarrassing. It would be horrifying. Yeah. And to think that I'm some righteous guy, I'm only saved by the blood of Jesus, and it's only by his grace. And so when I talk to people, no matter where they're coming from, I've learned over the years that I just really take a deep breath and just try to listen. Yeah. like the Hebrew word you were talking about.
Yeah.
And then I try to say, Holy Spirit, help me to speak into their lives.
Yeah.
Help me to speak into their lives what they need to hear, and not from what I want to tell them.
Mm-hmm.
And just to realize that each day, I drive home at night late, and I get in the driveway and I just go, Lord, thank you for giving me the lessons. Thank you for, thank you for loving me, in spite of, the things that I do. And I just know that it comes from him. I've always had a simple faith ever since I met him. And people always wanted me to be a complicated faith. And I always have been comfortable in just knowing that if God says it, I know he can do it.
Yeah.
I know he's able. And I know that if God made you, when I talk to a kid, if he's made you, he's got a purpose and a plan.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I don't have all the answers, but I know I love Jesus, and I know that he's able to do anything. That's all I know. I just know he can do it. And there's just something about that I've always had. I just know that he knows you and he loves you and he has a plan for your life.
Yeah.
And so when I realize, and when you see that and you don't act in a self-righteous, ripping, if you don't know Jesus, you're going to go to hell. I know that.
Yeah.
I know that. And so I guess that I don't want anybody to go there.
Yeah.
So I try to love, it's not something that I'm an evangelist in my heart. Mm-hmm. And I'm high in mercy and I'm an evangelist. And I always used to wonder why sometimes I could be really, I can't stop.
Yeah.
And a guy told me one time, he said, because I go, if I'm high in mercy, why am I so persistent sometimes? And he said, because you don't want them to perish. You love them so much that you don't want them to. So you're like, but it's like as you start understanding that, but it's all about being humble and broken and just taking that deep breath and saying, Lord, use me right now. How can I be used in this situation? I want to be used today for you. Mm-hmm. And God will open up the doors and he will do it. And I see it every day in the batting cages, and every day I'm ministering to people in God's spirit, and I'm just listening to his spirit, and I try to listen to that. And I know what his voice is. And when you know what it is, even when we adopted, it was like people like, you're 50 years old. What are you doing going to adopt? Yeah. But I knew it was his voice. Yeah. So I followed that voice. Debbie and I did. And if you listen to that voice, you'll see things and you'll do things that you never thought you could possibly ever do.
Yeah.
But then at the end, you're going, how great and how wonderful is our God?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he's the one that did it. Each child was $45,000, 40 to 50,000, whatever, and paperwork and, traveling and fear of going to these countries. And Debbie and I in our 50s, tromping through India to get to this orphanage where there's 145 children, no air conditioning. It's hot. And here's this little girl that you've been praying for. And she comes around the corner and she's, been burned, and she had been burned and left to die on the side of the road. She was 13 pounds. And I used to think I knew who God was. Yeah. See, as you trust the Lord, he opens up, he shows you things that you never thought you would see and understand about yourself. When you step out of that comfort zone, when you step out of the boat and you trust him, like Pastor kept doing yesterday, stepping out.
Do that step, yeah.
Take that step. But when you do, you see the power of God. That's why people ask me, how do you know God's real? I go, how long do you have? I can talk about Jesus all day and tell you every miracle and everything that he's done. When we're in this podcast, I could sit here for hours and tell you from the time I met Jesus and the exciting things that have gone on.
Yeah.
And, to be in that orphanage, and all of a sudden this little girl comes around the corner that you've been praying for, and she looks up at you, and you were a former pastor and professional baseball player and All-American and all these things you thought you were. And I felt like about an inch high. And I looked at this little girl, and she wouldn't even look up at me. And she said, and the Lord spoke to my heart as clear as he ever has in my life. He said, this is my kingdom.
Yeah.
It's the least.
Yeah.
And he said, and by the way, this was you before you knew me.
Wow.
You were scarred and you were broken and you had no hope.
Wow. That is so true.
And so I'm looking at it, and I just see that who God is.
Yeah.
People say, well, how do you know God's real? And I said, you see it, man, every day.
Yeah.
And so I looked at that, and then the next thing you know, that one that we're going to do turns into 5. Wow. And every time there's a story and an exciting thing within each one of God's goodness and provision. People walking up and giving $10,000 and,
wow.
That
alone, like it's heard of, but to experience someone giving you that, so you're able to accomplish what He has called you to do. Like God provides if He wants.
And they're strangers.
Yeah.
The family, close people, they gave, but not people I didn't even know gave more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Out of nowhere,
amazing. That is amazing.
And then all of them needed dental care, so we went in for one. We go in for one so we could afford one.
Yeah.
The one that was the worst. So we get in and we could do her.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, okay, payment plan, try to figure it out. And they were working that out.
Yeah.
So then I go to leave, and the guy goes, you need to go talk to my financial person. So I go in there, and the lady goes, we've decided that we're going to give your daughter free, we're going to cover her costs for her braces.
Wow.
Free.
Wow. I would have started crying.
So I was sitting there going, okay. I go, and he goes, every time you come in, I want to embarrass you. Just come up like you're paying, and we'll just give you the next appointment so you don't feel,
Yeah. Wow.
So he pays, they took care of her all the way through and fixed her. She had messed up teeth.
Wow.
First day I got her, when she cried and didn't want to be with us, I looked at her teeth and said, oh my goodness, there's going to be dental work.
Oh my God.
So they give it to her, and then after she's done with her program, they call us. The doctor calls us, says, can you guys be here at 7 tomorrow? The whole staff's going to come in early. We want to put braces on all your kids.
Wow. That is amazing.
So they put braces on all of our kids. And you look at the cost of what.
Yeah.
And it was free.
I always say, people can say, that they've never experienced God or that they don't believe, but it's like, you just have to choose to see and experience, because that is something that you can't overlook. Money, and especially in the world, makes the world spin a lot of the times. Like, people revolve themselves around currency and the value of it and what they can get. So to have a group of people collectively come together, all of their hearts connect and agree as a company to repair your daughter's teeth, and all of them, not just one, but all of them, no cost to you, no payment plan to you, because they could have at any point, they could have buried you in payment plans, and you could have done that and prayed about that, but they came together and they chose to do that, and that's not easy work, that's labor that they're putting
over time. They had a lot of appointments.
Wow,
all free.
Oh my gosh.
And when we first went to adopt, I had saved $10,000.
Yeah.
Didn't tell Debbie I'd saved it. They always tell you to have an emergency thing in case something happens.
Yeah.
And Debbie goes, we need 10 grand. I go, I got 10 grand.
Yeah.
She goes, you do? And I said, wow, yeah, because I saved money on the side. And so I said, we got enough to pay for the first payment for Leah.
Yeah.
Our first adoption. All right. And the next day our air conditioner went out.
Oh my goodness. Isn't that the way that it goes?
So the air conditioner goes out. The guy comes and he says it's going to be around $10,000. And I go outside and I'm like, God, you wanted me to adopt this kid. I had the money, and now my air conditioner goes out. Lord, I don't know what, I got to pay this air conditioner thing, but the first payment's due tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or on Monday. It was about the weekend, and I just was out there. I go, this is you. I don't know what to do, God. And so the guy comes and looks at this old guy. He comes and looks at it. He's a buddy of mine. He's a builder. And he looks at it and he says, my friend says you're adopted. I said, yeah. He goes, I became a Christian about 3-4 weeks ago. I go, really cool. I said, that's awesome, man. I said, late in life is some of the coolest times. And he goes, yeah. He goes, I was a hard dude. I said, it's okay, man. And I'm so thankful for you. So I said, well, can you fix it? It was summertime. And I go, just kids are, he goes, I'll come by tomorrow and I'll look at it.
Yeah.
I said, I have a baseball camp. I said, I won't be here. We'll all be gone. Debbie and I'll be gone. Debbie's got something. I said, but just, you can go in the house, whatever you need. So I come back and I look, and all these Hispanic dudes are in my yard when I got home. Like 10 Hispanic guys, And the air conditioner is all, It's a brand new one.
Wow,
back.
wow.
And I go, hey, bro. I said, what's up? He goes, hey, man. He goes, we gave you a new air conditioner. I said, yeah. And I thought, that guy didn't understand me.
Yeah.
He didn't understand what I said.
Yeah.
And so I go, well, I'm going to have to give him the 10 grand because and I go in and it's a whole new unit in my whole house.
Wow. That's
bigger
amazing.
than the other one.
Wow.
And I go up to this older guy and I said, hey, did I, he goes, look, don't panic. He goes, I just want you to know that I've never done anything even free for my mom.
Wow.
He said, I went to bed the other night after I talked to you. And he said, the Lord kept telling me, you have a brand new air conditioner that you got for free. And I want you to give it to this guy.
Wow. That is amazing.
And he said, I always sleep so good, but he goes, I couldn't sleep all night.
Wow.
I woke up in the morning and I knew I had to give this to you.
That is amazing.
People don't put brand new air conditioners in your house for free.
They do not. They do not.
And so I couldn't run to the bank fast enough to pay for that other option.
Yeah.
I just said, so we have a new air conditioner, teeth. I'm not saying that God pays for everything because, we work hard.
But if it's God's will, God will find a way. I heard someone once say, if it's God's will, it's God's bill. And it stuck with me because
it's true.
It's true. It's true. God will.
Well, you think 5 kids, 45, 50,000. I was a minister.
Wow.
You figure out about 5, how much that is.
Yeah.
Flights, food, bills.
Mm-hmm.
And, but it's like, and, it's just, the thing is, if God's in it, we win it.
That is good.
If he's in it, then we don't have to fear.
No.
And the last little girl we adopted, we had done 4 and we had a party. We celebrated. My dad flew in from Arizona. All the people that worked with us, they all, thank you. And when we had left the last time, there was this little girl who cried because she had taken care of our other 2 China. This is in China. Mm-hmm. We had 2 from India and 3 from China. But this is when we had 4.
Yeah.
And we were done after 4. We were like,
oh, beat.
Debbie and I were just exhausted. Debbie's homeschooling in second language and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so we were done and we were at the table and Chi-Chi, our first little girl from China, is interpreting from the new girl from China.
Yeah.
And she said, Mommy, this is after the party. Mommy, Daddy, Abigail say on when, that's the girl that was there. And she had a big wine stain on her face.
Yeah.
Red. She was so sweet. We had lunch with her. And she said, Abigail say that on when she used to take care of us and would feed us.
Wow.
And keep her food and protect us.
Wow.
And I heard that. I was like, okay, I don't need to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, so Debbie heard it and I was at breakfast. And so I go in and get in my shower. And I was like, God, you want us to go get this little girl?
God said, wait, there's more.
Yeah, but I was like, but it's overwhelming because it's so hard to do.
Yeah, I imagine.
And I was like, we had just done 4 and we were like relieved that it was kind of over.
You meant to do 1 and then 4. And even then you're like,
and it's so, anybody who's done it, it's not easy. It's really hard in the spiritual warfare and everything. And I'm in the shower and I remember this peace. To this day, I don't understand what it was, but it just hit me on the top of my head. It went all the way through my body and was like he said, don't worry.
Wow. Wow.
But I want you to do this.
Yeah. Wow.
And Debbie was doing her makeup. That's the only time we have good conversations. Like I'm in the shower, she's doing her makeup. And she says, in her way, she goes, did you hear that this morning?
Wow.
I said, and I'm crying. Deb doesn't cry. I cry. She cries like twice a year. And when she cries, we're all like, what?
Oh no, oh no, oh no.
What's wrong? But she goes, we got to go get her. I said,
Wow.
And it was impossible because in China, we called the people and we said, what about this little girl? And the lady finally goes, we're too old, right? And we can't go get her. And we're trying to make all these excuses. And the lady finally says, do you want to go you guys interested in her? She says, well, yeah. And she goes, well, I think that she's available. I mean, nobody wants her. I mean, I think they check into it. She finally calls us back and says, we got good news and bad news. The good news is you can adopt her. The bad news is she turns 14 in 3 months. It usually takes a year to do an adoption with all the paperwork. They said when she turns 14, you can't get her, no matter, even if you're there, if you don't have her.
And why is that? Is it because
it's just the Chinese law?
Oh.
So we just looked at each other and we prayed and we said, hey, let's go for it.
Wow.
And we went for it. And that's all the money and all that stuff. And I do it in 3 months. It usually takes a year.
Wow.
And we went for it. And all of a sudden they call somebody, say, fly here. So we came and we got her 3 days before her birthday.
Wow.
I remember the Chinese guy goes, you barely make it. I said, yeah.
And God has a pattern with the number 3 too, because that's just, I love that.
It was just, he was what?
He has a pattern with the number 3.
Yeah. So now it's 5,
Yeah.
So, this a miracle, we get her and we finish the 5. And so we, it's just, God just through all of it, he's just, if you listen to his voice, if you're tender and you listen to his voice and you know his voice, then you walk in that, even if the world totally doesn't understand. You see out throughout the word of God with Abraham and, going to where?
Yeah.
You don't know where you're going. You just go,
Yeah.
You just don't always know.
Just keep going.
Just listen to his voice. Your podcast, your whatever it is, that if you know his voice, you walk in that and he will provide.
Yeah.
And he will give you the strength and you see how weak you are. Mm-hmm. But in our weakness, he is strong.
Yeah. And I think that's what I love is there's such a high expectation that I need to be able to carry everything. I need to be able to handle everything. I need to, before I can trust the Lord, I first need to get myself together. Before I can become, a Christian or have a relationship with God, I first need to remove all of the things in my life that make me imperfect. But in reality, like you said, what your dad said to you when you were 8 years old, which is, it's so true with our Father, is he loves you where you are right now. Mm-hmm. There is nothing that you could have already done or will do to remove his love from you. And that is such a hard truth to accept, that someone can love you with all of the things that you have, with all the things that you've done, with all the things that have been done onto you and the things that you feel like should be unforgivable or the people you are unable to forgive. It's so true. God loves you. And it's a very hard truth to accept, though, to believe in a reality where you stand right now, there is no exception. There's no such thing as, but where you are is where he loves you. There is no checklist that you have to check off to get to that point. There is no set of 5 things that you need to complete, a 12-step plan. There's everything that you are in that moment by just believing that you are loved and believing that Jesus came so that you could accept it, so that you could embrace that love. Because before, there were all of these rules and expectations, but Jesus came to break down all of the man-made things that people are starting to create, all of these random beliefs that they started to, all of the difficult things. Even the Pharisees would say we can't enter the house of a tax collector because then we become dirty and then we have to go and cleanse ourselves. Meanwhile, Jesus would have dinner in that house and would sit because that's where he wanted to be. And it's a perfect example of your life where that's where you want to be. And when the Spirit is in your heart, everyone is led differently. But you go where you are called and you do so joyously. And it's such a hard truth to believe a lot of the times is I am loved where I am right now with all of my imperfections, where my finances stand, where my relationship stands, where what I look like, who I am around. That doesn't matter. A lot of people think that as soon as you jump into a relationship with Jesus, you have to immediately 360 your life. And that's a lot of the times that's not it. If you just start by having a simple relationship and allowing him to be in your life, then God does everything else. Then God will surround you by people who want to support you and love you and cheer for you for who you are, and not because you got all the good hits or you struck out, but because of who you are as a person. And that is the beauty behind relationship with God. And it's beautiful to see that in your life. And it kind of, you reminded me a little bit of Pastor Kendrick when you said, you know, they like these $10,000 and then this new AC. It's kind of like when he said, you with the woman who tithed, and he said, you better come through for her. In that moment, it's like, Lord,
I love that what he said.
You better come through for me. Like, what do you mean? And so, yeah, you're right. God doesn't pay for everything, but if it's his will and you let his will reign over your life, life becomes easier, and it is becoming harder because you have to deny yourself your flesh. Yeah. You have to deny yourself wanting to cheat on your spouse because that's a momentary flesh moment.
Right.
And what you put on the line is all of these years of memories and life and relationship, and over 1 second you can lose it, and then it starts this horrible domino effect. So denying yourself to then not have to face, even in that moment it might seem triumphant and good, but then you look at the payout of that and it's not good. It's horrible, and it's this domino effect of pain and all of these things and the things that you can lose. And it's just kind of like people talk about, you know, Christianity and how hard it is and all the rules that there are, but God by himself, like the Spirit alone will soften your heart. Like you said, like you want to lose your temper, but you can feel the Spirit say, no, we're going to show grace in this moment, and we're not going to lash out on this person, and we're not going to rip their head off, even though we want to. We're so imperfect. There have been plenty of times where I'm like, oh, I need to step back. I have an attitude right now. That's not fair to that person. And the Holy Spirit will quickly grab your attention and say, oh, we're not behaving the way that we should. And a lot of the times there are stereotypes that Christians are, you know, have this high expectation for you, and that you should be perfect and reading your Bible and coming to church every single day. But your relationship starts with the Lord, just you and him. No one else is in that relationship. And that's beautiful, because it's different for everyone. Your relationship with Jesus versus Debbie's relationship with Jesus. Although you guys are in a relationship, it's so different in her life and in your life.
Yeah, but you learn to embrace that. Like the time she points her finger for me to go a certain direction, she's trying to help me because I'm terrible with directions. It's not a personal offense. Yeah. So I've learned to embrace and like the things that are different than me. Yeah. And laugh about them, like, because that's Debbie, you know, and just like they know me, you know, that my car is going to be messy sometimes, and, you know, I'm in a hurry trying to get to this person. If I'm late sometimes, because I'm talking to some guy that nobody would talk to. Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's like, you know, it doesn't mean it's right to be, you know, I try to get a schedule and to be on time, but sometimes I get, you know, because of my like ADHD tough stuff, I'm like talking to some grocery person because they needed somebody to talk to. Yeah. And, you know, and I lose track of the time, you know, but everyone kind of laughs and they just go, you know, Dad's that kind of, you know, Dad can be like that. But, you know, it's like Jim Elliot was one of my heroes of the faith. And he was a guy who was killed by the Auca Indians when he was a missionary. And he said, he is no fool who gives that which he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose. Mm-hmm. And I read his memoirs, and he said, Lord, bathe me in the oil of your Spirit that I might burn constantly for you. Wow. And so the Spirit of God's on you, that you burn constantly for him. Yeah. And Corrie ten Boom was one of my heroes too. And she was in a concentration camp, and her whole family was killed because they hid Jews. And she was a Christian, and she lost her whole family. And she survived by a miracle. If you read her story, you know the hiding place. But she said, there is no pit too deep that God's not deeper still. Wow. So true. And so he's deep. Yeah. And, you know, that's the key, you know. And we got to look at ourselves. I remember one time I was helping people that lived in tents, and I brought them to church, and I brought like 10 or 12 of them. And I was in the hallway, and just so happy that they were there. Some lady walked up to me and said, hey, how do you expect me to worship when I have these people that smell around me? They stink. And I looked at her and I said, they're not the ones that smell, ma'am. And she goes, what's that supposed to mean? I go, you figure it out.
Oh, yeah. So
And she goes, I'm going to talk to the pastor. I go, go ahead.
Yeah.
You're not going to come in here and tell me that these people smell.
Yeah.
You're the one that smells.
Yeah.
Jesus is happy with them.
Yeah. Does not care what they have on their back.
And if they smell so bad, take them home.
Yeah.
Give them a shower.
Help them. Open your shower to them and give them your soap and help them smell better.
Yeah, so help
Don't
them
identify the problem and then walk away and do nothing for it.
You're mad at me. You know, like,
Oh my goodness. And that's such a great note too about everything is what God can do with your pain. What God can do with your pain and how he can use it. Because a lot of the time people's pain is their testimony.
yeah.
It's proof of God's love.
It's the depth of who God is, you know, in our deepest, his strength is. He's there and just loves you. He looks at you and just does not. He understands and identifies. And it's okay to go outside like I did and go, God, what in the world my air conditioner broke. I mean, what? He's a big enough God to handle that. You talk to God like, God, what's up? Why in the world did this happen? Why did my husband leave me?
Yeah.
Why did this happen? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Even to yell at him, man, he's a big God.
Yeah, you know, I didn't realize this was a thing until Martin told me. But I was talking about the Bible and I told him like, oh my gosh, I tried to read Lamentations one time. I couldn't do it. I was like, it's tough in there. And he's like, oh yeah, it's definitely people expressing their sorrow. And he was like, well, you know, when I was in college, we actually did that for someone. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh well, we in a group of students led by someone, we brought someone in who was really struggling and kind of got in a circle for them and allowed them to lament in a spiritually filled room, like to bring it to the Lord. And we just were there. And sometimes you would talk or sometimes you wouldn't respond. Like we would let them process and bring it to the Lord. And also we just surrounded them in that state and prayed over them and truly let them lament. And I was shocked. I said, this is a thing. This is a thing that people do. Where has this been? Where can I sign up the next time I need it? And it was such a relief too to think like, to normalize lamenting, to normalize your sorrow, to normalize that God wants you to come to him when you are upset and angry.
Yep.
Because when you don't go to him, the enemy will use it instead. And he will be like, yeah, why didn't he do that for you? Why would the AC break if he's by your side? If he truly was kind of like Job. You know, Job did nothing wrong. And all of his friends were like, you must have done something wrong to have the treatment that you are receiving now. Yeah. And when you read it now, you're like, no, he didn't do anything wrong. God was making a point, and he got twice everything back. But in the end of it, your sorrow and your pain brings you closer to God. You just have to be willing to bring it to God, to humble yourself before the Lord and say, "What the heck? Yeah. I am in pain right now. I am disappointed right now. Maybe I had a higher expectation than what I did. Like, open my eyes and reveal to me what I'm not seeing. What are you growing me in right now? Is this, I prayed for faith. Is this you putting me in faith? I prayed for patience. Is this you making me be patient?" And so good off of everything that you've said so far. Like, God truly loves everything that you come with, and your entire load, no matter how big, how grimy or dirty or whatever it is, how smelly, he doesn't care. He wants all of that. And so God can do so much with our pain. And as I'm sure you already know, like what I'm hoping to do with this podcast and what you have so like openly and willingly provided today with your story and everything that you've opened up about is so incredible, because God can move in your life, and he moved. I mean, he literally moved heaven and earth. Like, you were up in heaven in your plane, going to those girls, and on when you landed, you felt what you felt when you were there. And so God is just, there is no, county line for God. Like, there's no such thing that you flew over there and then God's like, you're on your own now, buddy. I don't know. You got there. You're going to have to figure it out. He rode there with you, and he came back with you, and he still moved your heart.
And I think the key also is that for me at 62, is my deepest prayer, and you kind of said it earlier, is I want to finish. I don't want to ruin my testimony down the stretch. I mean, that's my goal. I want to finish strong. I want to be like Caleb. You know, I want to go get that which God has given me.
Yeah.
It's mine. I want to go get it. And I want to finish strong. I want to finish with a testimony. I want to finish for my children and for my, I don't want to falter on the stretch run. I think that's the key. Most people die when they climb Mount Everest on the descent, not on.
Wow. That's good.
When they're coming down, because they lose, hey man, we made it.
What else is there for me to do?
Yeah. I mean, and I want to finish strong. And that's my prayer. I want to finish, I want to know God deeper. I want to know him. I want him to use us to even greater things, whatever that might be. I don't know what that is.
Yeah. That's amazing, because that is relation to what I said earlier, like David. You start so strong and something happened.
Exactly.
Noah, you start so strong and something happened. And that to me has always been very fascinating in the descent. What happened? What I relate to that, where I constantly pray too. Like I want to remain humble and open and growing. I do not want to become like David and lose my way. Like I am going to be imperfect. But may I never lose sight of the power of prayer and seeking you out and all of those things. So that's incredible. That is incredible that you mentioned that, because and to anyone listening, it's also important to take in of how much longer are you willing to sit on your hands and limit yourself to everything that you're capable of, and to discover what God has placed in you. Because the longer you sit on your hands, the more time you steal from yourself. I know that firsthand. Like once you allow your hands to free themselves and to take that step with your hands unchained, it is incredible what God can do in your life and the things that he can move. So ask yourself, ask the Lord, what am I not allowing myself to see? And what am I not allowing myself to believe in? Yeah. The most that you have to lose is you just go back to where you currently are. If you don't succeed in whatever it is that you think you need to be succeeding. And then that's not a bad idea to just go back where you are. You're already fine here and you're comfortable here and you've been comfortable here this entire time. Why not take that step, get curious and see what happens? Because if that's the worst case scenario, then the best case scenario can only be 100-fold more of what you can have.
And when you trust him and you go out, you get to see some things that will blow you away. When I saw that, my little Leah's face, and God spoke to me when I see God work in those doctors' hearts, and I see guys walking them, give me 10 grand, and you see the power of God, and you see them, your daughter's saved, and you see them now. I dropped one of my daughters off at college, at community college, and she drove me there. And when I first got her, she was so malnourished. It was Savitar second. When she was so malnourished, she couldn't walk to the mailbox.
Wow.
She was abandoned at 4. And she walked and looked for her mommy for 2 days. And then later on, she was attacked and had her throat cut. And she was, to the world, nothing. Yeah. So I drop her off at a community college, and she's brilliant and smart. I mean, smarter than I could ever wish to be. Yeah. And she's going to do these amazing things. And she does sign language, and she's could be anything she wants. She's so talented. And I drop her off, and she's a real thinker, Yeah. She gets out of the car, and, I'm getting ready to, go to the gym, try to stay in shape, to keep up with these girls. And I'm going down, and I'm just about, and she sticks her head back in, and she's just a woman of words, just few words, to speak them. She says, Dad, just think, when I first got here, I couldn't walk to the mailbox.
Wow.
She said, I drove you here today. And I'm going to college.
Wow.
See ya. She takes off.
And I'll leave you with that. I'm bawling in the car.
I'm trying to drive down Highway 40. What the heck did you just say to me? But it's just these glimpses that people don't understand when you're in God's will and you do it, no matter how much pain or hurt or heartache or what the cost is. You count the cost. When you follow Jesus Christ, you count the cost. When he looked at them all when they were following him. Everybody wanted to get on the bandwagon. And he said, you need to deny yourself and you need to follow me. You need to pick up your cross. But with that comes these blessings that go beyond any type of riches or power or
And
money.
understanding.
What she said to me made it worth everything.
Priceless. Absolutely.
Or when I baptized them all.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Wow. That's amazing. What an
And
honor.
I even have one now that's denying the Lord right now
Yeah.
in her life. And that's fine because I just told her, I said, we love you no matter what.
Yeah.
This is your faith and your thing. Mommy and I are always going to love you.
Yeah.
Really? She's looking for that. But my point is that if anybody's listening, that it's not when you said earlier that people say, well, following Jesus, it's freedom, it's joy, it's strength, it's hope, it's life. When you wake up, you have purpose and when you step out for God, there's no matter what the cost, it's worth every bit of it. Even if the worst thing scenario is if you die, you're with Jesus, you're with Christ. And when we get there, I think that we're not going to sit there and worry about what people thought.
Yeah. And it's beautiful to think that God saw her, all of those girls, from where they were, where no one else would see them or would bother to look in their direction. The Lord said, I want her and I want you to go get her for me. I need someone. It's giving your child over to someone and entrusting them with that.
Yeah.
What the Lord did was, I am handing you my daughter and I want you to take care of her and I want you to love her and to pour into her. And the Lord saw the things done to her and said, I am a redeemer. I love my children. I care for my kids. I bring life. And one of my favorite verses in the Bible, when I first became in a relationship with the Lord, always stuck with me, was Ezekiel 36:26, which is, I will take your cold stone heart and I will give you one of flesh and blood and beating. And that's the representation of his kingdom. That's the representation of God's true heart. Is he doesn't care where you are. He doesn't care how stonified your heart may be, how hard it may be. Like That's right. will crack and open it. And when it opens, what it will reveal inside is a heart of flesh, a beating one, no matter how. Saul is a perfect example. I love the story of how you went from killing Christians. Like you're living and breathing. All you did was hunt down Christians, murder them. And then you go
righteously in his mind.
Exactly. And you go from that to becoming a Christian. The same very person who you hunted is the person you became. And so that to me speaks volumes about the Lord. Like he looks and he sees, and I want you. And so there is nowhere where you are right now that God cannot not want you. Like he wants you. He wants to be with you. He wants to be in relationship with you. And that verse has always spoke life to me. And I love that you were so obedient, because now you have that blessing to have that conversation and be driving. And it's not raining outside, but somehow everything's really blurry all of a sudden.
That's people say, what are you doing now in ministry? And I'm like, I felt God called me. God spoke to me and said, I want you to be a dad to these girls.
Wow.
He said, you're really good at being a dad.
What an honor.
So when you see all the ministry stuff and you go, look at all that stuff. And then, but God said, I want you to be a dad to these girls. So every day I hug them and I speak into their hearts.
Yeah.
And I love them I poured my heart into trying to be the best dad. And I come home at night and they're sleeping and I just go in their hallway and I pray for them.
Wow.
I say, God, what an honor it is to be the dad.
Yeah. To get to steward over your children.
I just practiced for 10 hours.
Wow.
I worked for 10 hours.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's a joy.
Yeah.
It really is. Because because God's spirit, just the peace of that. I don't know what it is. It's hard, but it's not hard. It's like, it's not a burden.
Yeah. But for the flesh, it's hard. Like it can be exhausting. But like for your spirit.
That's what folks, if you're listening out there, it's that when you're in his will, there's peace. In the midst, even if you're going to be a martyr, the worst thing everybody always worries about. I think there's something happens in that point when it's death that God will make a way for you to, peace. of the death.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but I've seen people die. As a minister, I've watched it. I've watched people that don't know Jesus, and I've watched people that know Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And there's something that's there. There's something
so powerful.
It's powerful.
Yeah, kind of like the lion's den. I mean,
yeah. It's like a lot of Christians died in there, but there's something. There were people leading people to Christ while they were getting eaten by lions.
Yeah.
And there were Romans that were jumping in and getting eaten too and accepting Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, what in the world's that,
That goes beyond any understanding. And to leave on that note, I know you're a very busy man, so I won't keep you all day, but I appreciate you and appreciate all the time that you've spent here. And, hopefully one day I can have you back and we can
that's great.
talk more. I feel like we could talk all day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to What God Has Done With My Pain. As always, a huge shout out to Lazuli for her song, No Greater Love, that has helped make this podcast come to life. You can find her on Spotify and Instagram at Lazuli PROJ and at We The New Breed, where you'll find artists using their gifts to glorify God. Swing by at What Way This Way on Instagram to catch some behind-the-scenes snippets. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss a single interview. In the meantime, I would love to hear from you on social media or email. Until the next episode.